I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. I married Sarah 10 years ago, and for most of that time I honestly thought we had a good thing going. She was attractive, sharp-tongued, and a little bitchy at times, but I always figured that was just her personality. She loved our daughter, Lily, more than anything, or so I thought. Our daughter had been sick for a long time, really long. It was a nightmare that dragged us through hospitals and endless tests. Eventually, Lily needed a bone marrow transplant. We were lucky enough to find a donor, someone who matched perfectly, this guy named Mike, who turned out to be a close family friend of ours. It was a miracle. I remember the day we finally got the call that Lily was stable, finally in remission. Relief flooded over me like a tidal wave, but that relief was short-lived. It was around that time that I started noticing strange things about Sarah. She'd become distant, secretive. She seemed to be hiding her phone more often, sneaking around, texting late at night. When I asked her what she was doing, she'd brush me off with some bitchy remark, saying I was just paranoid or that I was insecure. I didn't press too hard because I figured I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I could feel it in my gut. One day, I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower. I never did that before, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. I just wanted to see if there was any proof of what I suspected. The messages were right there, waiting for me. Texts with Mike, her supposed friend, the guy who saved Lily's life, but that's not all. The conversations weren't innocent at all. They were flirtatious, full of sexual innuendos. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me. And with Mike, the guy whose life she'd supposedly helped save, I felt like my world was shattering. It was a punch to the stomach I couldn't even breathe through. How could she do this? How could she betray us like that? Especially after everything Lily went through, after the miracle of her recovery. It made me furious. But underneath the rage, I felt a crushing sadness. I'd always trusted her, believed in her. And now I found out she'd been lying, sneaking around with a man who had a very intimate connection to Lily's survival, who, in a way, was more than just a donor. He was a hero in our lives. And she was cheating with him. I couldn't even process the full weight of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying those messages over and over. I looked at her sleeping peacefully in bed, and I wondered how I'd missed all the signs. Was I blind? Was I naive? I thought about confronting her, but part of me was afraid of what that would lead to. Part of me wanted to storm out of the house, to shout, to break everything. But I held back. I needed to think first. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I needed answers, and I needed her to face what she'd done. I waited until she came downstairs, trying to look normal. But the moment she saw me, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise, maybe guilt, or perhaps just defiance. I took a deep breath and I asked her directly, "Sarah, what's going on with you and Mike? I know about the messages. I saw everything. Tell me the truth." She looked at me with that bitchy glare she had perfected over the years. "Oh, so now you're spying on me? Really? You're such a jealous idiot. Whatever you think you saw, you don't know the half of it. You're just paranoid." Her voice was cold, dismissive, but I wasn't buying it. I pressed her again, harder this time, and that's when her mask started to slip. But she still lied, of course. She told me they were just friends, that Mike was just being supportive, that I was overreacting. I wanted to believe her, but I knew better. I had seen enough. I felt the anger bubbling inside me, pure, unfiltered rage. But beneath that was something darker, a sense of betrayal so deep I wondered if I'd ever trust her again. Lily was still recovering, and I knew I had to stay calm for her sake, but inside, I was already planning what I'd do next. I needed to get to the truth, and I needed to do it on my own terms. I just didn't know how much more I could take. After that morning, everything changed. I couldn't look at Sarah the same way anymore. The woman I loved, the woman who had promised to stand by me and Lily through everything, had been lying to my face. And not just lying, but sneaking around behind my back with a man who was genuinely a hero in our family story. Mike was the reason Lily was still alive. That fact made everything even more complicated. How could she do this? How could she betray us with someone so integral to our family's salvation? I spent the next few days in a fog. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, and all I could think about was that betrayal. I kept asking myself whether confronting her again would do any good, whether she'd finally admit the truth or just keep lying. But I knew I had to face her again. I had to hear it from her directly, even if I dreaded what she would say. When she finally came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room. She looked annoyed, probably expecting me to just accept her bullshit answers again. But I was done pretending. I told her to sit down. Sarah, I know about the messages. I know what you've been doing behind my back. I want the truth, no more lies. She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. Look, I don't have to explain myself to you. I'm not cheating on you. I was just talking to Mike, that's all. You're being paranoid again. You see something that's not there. That's when I snapped. Not there. Are you kidding me? I found the messages, the flirtatious texts, the sexual innuendos. Don't lie to me, Sarah. You've been sleeping with him. I saw the way you look at him, the way you talk to him. It's obvious. How long has this been going on? Her face turned red and she started yelling, deflecting. You're overreacting as usual. You're just jealous because Mike saved our daughter's life. That's all this is. You're twisting everything. You're trying to ruin everything because you're insecure. I felt my blood boil. I couldn't believe I was hearing this. After everything we'd been through, after Lily's miracle and all the pain, I was supposed to believe her bullshit. I looked at her, disgusted. You're a liar. You slept with him, didn't you? That's why you've been so secretive. That's why you've been sneaking around. Don't insult my intelligence with your lies. She sneered at me, her voice dripping with contempt. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm sick of your accusations. Just leave me alone. That was the moment I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to decide what to do, whether to confront her further or just walk away, but I already knew. This was the end of trust between us. The betrayal was too deep and I felt crushed. The woman I married, the mother of my child, had been cheating on me with someone who had been a hero in our darkest hour. How could I ever look at her the same way again? How could I forgive this? I spent the night wrestling with my feelings. I was angry, devastated, and confused. I wanted to lash out, to hurt her the way she had hurt me, but I also knew I needed to be smart. I needed to figure out my next move carefully. I couldn't afford to make any rash decisions. Lily needed me to stay strong, even if I didn't feel strong at all. I promised myself I wouldn't let her see how much she'd broken me, at least not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a fog of rage still lingering in my mind. I kept replaying the scene from the night before, trying to figure out what I missed, what I could have done differently. I knew I had to face her again, but I also had to plan my next move carefully. I couldn't just confront her blindly. I needed more concrete evidence, something undeniable that would put an end to her lies once and for all. I decided to do a little digging of my own. I knew she'd been sneaking her phone around and hiding her conversations, so I started checking her messages again. I wanted to find out if she'd slipped up, if she'd left any clues behind. I spent hours scrolling through her texts, looking for anything out of place, and then I found it. A text from Mike sent just the night before that was so explicit, so damning, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. It was a simple message, but it cut straight to the core. Can't wait to see you tonight. I've been thinking about you all day. Let's make it special. There was no mistaking what that meant. And what made it worse was that she had responded almost immediately, saying something like, "Me too, I'll be waiting." I stared at those messages, feeling like I'd been punched again. It was proof that she had lied to me, that she'd been hiding something even more intimate than I'd suspected. I couldn't believe she'd actually gone through with it. I felt a mixture of disgust and heartbreak. How could she do this to me, to Lily? How could she put her own selfish desires ahead of everything we'd been through? But I also knew I couldn't just confront her without a plan. I had to be smart about this. I wanted her to admit everything, to confess in her own words. I needed a way to catch her, to make her realize I knew the truth, so I set up a little trap. I left my phone in plain sight with a recording app running in the background. I wanted to record her when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I knew she'd be back to her old tricks, texting Mike or whoever else she was talking to, and I was right. That afternoon, I heard her come into the house, her heels clicking on the floor. She was acting normal, too normal actually. She seemed almost too casual, like she didn't fear being caught. I pretended to be busy, sitting on the couch, pretending not to pay attention. Then I heard her pick up her phone and start texting again. I kept quiet, waiting for the moment I knew would come. And then it happened. I heard her voice, low and seductive, whispering into her phone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was talking to Mike, clearly planning their next rendezvous. I pressed record, heart pounding. I wanted her to say everything out loud, her lies, her betrayal, her justification. I needed to hear her own words. When she finally put the phone down, I confronted her. I told her I had everything on recording, that I knew what she'd been doing. Her face went pale and her usual bitchy attitude dissolved for a moment. She tried to deny it, but I played the recording loud enough for her to hear. Her voice, her words, they sealed her fate. She looked at me with a mixture of anger and defiance. "You're crazy, you're just jealous. This doesn't mean anything. You're overreacting," she spat out, trying to dismiss the evidence. But I was done listening to her lies. I knew the truth. This wasn't some innocent flirtation or a mistake. It was an affair, a betrayal of everything we'd built together, and I was furious. I couldn't believe I'd been blind for so long. All the signs, all the lies, the sneaking around, all of it explained now. From that moment on, I knew I had to decide what to do. I couldn't stay married to someone who had betrayed me so deeply. But I also knew that ending things wouldn't be easy. The pain was still fresh and raw, and I felt like I was walking on broken glass. Still, I couldn't ignore what I'd found. I had to protect Lily and myself from this woman. Lies and betrayal. I had a lot to think about, and I knew the next steps would define the rest of my life. That night, I sat alone in the dark, replaying everything I had uncovered. The recordings, the texts, her reaction, everything. It was as if my entire world had been turned upside down in a matter of days. I couldn't sleep, and honestly, I didn't want to. I kept thinking about Lily, how she'd already been through so much with her transplant, her fight to survive, and now this. It was too much to process all at once. I knew I couldn't stay in that house like this. I had to do something, but what? I was angry, yes. Hurt, absolutely. Betrayed, undeniably. But I also knew I needed to think about what was best for Lily. She was the innocent in all this mess. I didn't want her to grow up thinking her mother was a liar or that her parents' marriage was a sham. I had to keep that in mind, even if it tore me apart inside. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to confront Sarah again, but this time I'd be prepared. I had the proof, and I was going to lay everything out on the table. I couldn't let her deny it anymore. I wanted her to face the truth, to admit what she'd done, and then I'd decide what to do afterward. I needed her to understand that I wasn't going to be manipulated or lied to anymore. When she came down that morning, she looked annoyed, as if she already knew what I was planning. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to gauge what I was up to. I stood in front of her, my face cold and steady. I told her I knew everything about the texts, the recordings, her sneaking around. I told her I wasn't going to tolerate her lies anymore. She tried to brush it off, to act like I was overreacting again, but I cut her off. I laid out the facts step by step. Her face twisted with anger. "You're crazy. You're just a jealous fool. None of this is true," she spat, but I didn't buy it. I pressed play on my phone, playing the recording she'd made for herself the night before. Her voice, clearly planning her next move. With Mike filled the room, her face drained of color. She was caught completely exposed. She screamed, "You're stalking me, you're crazy, you're ruining everything." But I stayed quiet. I was done waiting for her to spin her lies. I told her she could deny all she wanted, but I had the evidence now. I told her I was leaving, that I couldn't be with someone who could do this, who could betray her own family like this. She looked furious, her eyes blazing with contempt. "You're just mad because you're a pathetic little control freak. I don't love you anymore anyway. I don't even want to be married to someone like you." Her words stung, but I was beyond caring. I told her I'd be taking Lily with me and I'd be filing for divorce. I wanted her out of my life, out of my house, and out of our daughter's future. At that moment, I realized I was finally free from the lie I'd been living in. I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. I'd lost part of what I thought was my life, but I also gained clarity. I saw her for what she truly was: selfish, manipulative, and unfaithful. And I knew I could never trust her again. I would protect Lily, keep her safe from the fallout, and try to rebuild what I could from the wreckage. In the days that followed, I moved out. I took Lily with me, knowing she deserved stability and honesty. I didn't want her to grow up in a house filled with lies. I told her everything in a way she could understand and promised I'd always be there for her. I kept her close, and slowly I started to piece my life back together. It was painful, yes, but it was also a new beginning. Looking back now, I realize that this betrayal taught me something I never expected. Sometimes the people we trust the most can hurt us the deepest, but it also showed me that I was stronger than I thought. I could survive this, for Lily's sake and for my own. That's the only thing that matters now. I learned to listen to my instincts, to trust myself, and to never ignore the signs of a lie again. Because in the end, honesty is everything, especially when it comes to the people we love. Over the next few weeks, the process of healing began, though it was anything but smooth. Moving out with Lily was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every step felt like tearing my heart out, knowing I was leaving behind a woman I once loved, someone I thought I knew. The house that once echoed with laughter and shared dreams now felt cold and empty, haunted by betrayal. I tried to focus on Lily, on giving her a sense of stability, even though inside I was breaking apart. The divorce process was swift. I wanted to get it over with, to put that chapter behind us. Sarah fought me every step of the way, throwing accusations, crying, and trying to manipulate the situation. But I stayed firm. I had the evidence, I had Lily, and more than anything, I had clarity. I knew I was making the right choice, even if it hurt like hell. What hurt the most was watching Sarah twist her words, pretending to be the victim. She told friends and family I was paranoid, that I was overreacting, that I was just jealous. None of that mattered. I knew the truth, and I had. The recordings, the texts, everything I needed. I didn't want her to get away with it, not without facing the consequences. And I also wanted Lily to grow up knowing she was loved and protected, even if her mother had betrayed us. Lily, for her part, was resilient. She was still recovering from her own health scare, and I tried to shield her from the worst of it. I explained things in a way she could understand, telling her that sometimes adults make mistakes, but that I loved her no matter what. Her innocence kept me going. I promised her I'd always be there to protect her, and I kept that promise. Every day I saw her little face, and it reminded me of what truly mattered: her happiness, her safety, her future. Meanwhile, I started to rebuild my life. I got a new place, one where I could breathe again. I focused on my job, on being a good dad, and on healing myself from the emotional wounds. It wasn't easy. I still had nights where I'd lie awake, thinking about what I lost, replaying the betrayal in my mind. But slowly I learned to accept it. I had to. Let go of the anger, the pain, and the betrayal to move forward. I also sought support. I talked to friends who had gone through similar situations, and I even started therapy. It helped me process the heartbreak and the shock of discovering my wife's affair, especially with someone so intertwined in Lily's life. I realized I wasn't alone, and that getting help was okay. I learned that forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me, to let go of the bitterness and move on. Looking back, I understand now that betrayal cuts deep. It's like a wound that leaves scars, but over time those scars can fade. I've come to accept that my marriage was a lie, that my wife's actions shattered the trust I thought we had. But I also learned that I have the strength to survive and rebuild. I have my daughter, and that's what keeps me going. Most importantly, I've learned to listen to my instincts. Never ignore the signs, no matter how uncomfortable or inconvenient they are. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. But life goes on. It always does. And sometimes the only way forward is to accept the pain, learn from it, and keep moving, no matter how hard it is. That's what I'm doing now. And I know deep down I'll be okay. It's been months since I made that final decision to leave her, and honestly, I feel like I'm finally starting to breathe again. The pain still lingers, sure. There are days when I catch myself thinking about how everything fell apart so suddenly. But I've learned something crucial in all this, something I never really appreciated before. Trust, once shattered, can't be easily mended, and some betrayals cut so deep they leave scars that never fully fade. Still, I've come to see that life isn't about dwelling on what's lost but about focusing on what I still have. Lily is growing stronger every day. She's resilient, much more than I ever imagined a kid could be. She's happy, playful, and she doesn't carry the weight of our shattered marriage on her shoulders. I make sure she feels loved, safe, and cared for. More than anything, I want her to know she's my world. I keep telling her stories, taking her to the park, and just being present. That's all I can do now. Keep her safe and give her a childhood free of the chaos and betrayal that marred her early years. As for me, I've started to rebuild my sense of self. I've gone back to my hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. Not that I'm rushing into anything. There's no rush. For now, I just want to enjoy life without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. I've learned to trust my instincts more, to listen to that little voice inside telling me when something's wrong. It's a painful lesson, but a necessary one. Because if there's one thing I've realized, it's that honesty and integrity matter more than anything else. Without those, everything else crumbles. Looking back, I don't regret the choices I've made. Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the right thing. I refuse to let her betrayal define me. Instead, I see it as a turning point, a brutal but necessary chapter that pushed me to be stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I've learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself and those you love is to walk away from the lies and the toxicity, no matter how difficult that might be. Now I focus on healing myself, my daughter, and the future I want to build. I've realized that happiness isn't about having everything perfect. It's about making peace with your past, forgiving yourself, and moving forward with hope. That's what I'm doing now. Every day is new, and even though I still carry the scars of betrayal, I know I'll come out the other side stronger. This story taught me that life can change in an instant. One moment you're trusting, the next you're betrayed in the worst way imaginable. But in that chaos, I found my strength. I found that I can survive even the deepest wounds. And ultimately, I learned that no matter how much someone hurts you, you have the power to pick yourself up, rebuild, and find happiness again. Because at the end of the day, that's what truly matters, learning to love and trust again, one step at a time.